joining me again, Sarah. I've brought you here today because you're a speech and language pathologist. I had some questions that I think would be helpful for parents to know.
Yeah.
It's about communication in general. So how is communication developed in kids?
Well, I would say communication is the most wonderful thing out of everything that children develop. It starts so very, very early. So as soon as a child is born, they are able to recognize their parent's voice just because their mother's been carrying them for the 9 months. And so it's just an amazing thing that kids do, that they can look towards their parents as soon as they're little babies. And that first year of life, even though kids aren't talking, they're doing so much to communicate. So they're learning joint attention, with looking at their parent, looking over at things that they love and looking back at their parent to share that enjoyment. They're beginning to make sounds, but before that they're actually learning to eat, and that eating actually sets up your muscles to be able to make your first sounds. So feeding is so important, and the development of that, and then you're learning to make sounds and play with it and have fun. You're taking turns. So just in that first year, there's so much going on, and sometimes families are like, oh, there's not much going on, but they're taking so much in. So by the first year, around the first birthday, we are expecting kids to be saying a couple of words. It does take a little bit longer, and you don't need to be concerned if it's taking a little bit longer for your child. But say between 12 and 15 months, we're starting to hear mum and dad. We're starting to hear a couple of words that are really important to your child, like say a sibling name or a pet name, or something like more very social things. It's not usually labeling, it's more to do with more or uh-oh or fun things that kids are saying. So that happens sort of between the 12 and 15 months age. Do you want me to keep going through? There's quite a lot of development that goes on.
Yeah, I did have some questions about, I guess, what's a broad overview of typical communication development, but I did just want to reflect that it sounds more like, so I learned something about the eating is what sets up the muscles for language and that kind of thing, but it sounds like too, it's not, communication is much more than just the speech as well. So kids from a young age are starting with that communication, even if it's not speech.
And communication is fun. If it's not fun, kids aren't really that keen to communicate. So the fun and play is so important for communication. It's probably really, we kind of have building blocks towards getting to talking, and talking's right at the top of what we do. So first we pay attention to others. So we're paying attention to mum and dad, we're paying attention to our brothers and sisters, and then we develop some play skills and some social interaction skills, and then on top of that, then we start to understand and that's that first year. Kids are learning to understand in that first year many words before we get to talking. So those foundation skills really happen in those first few years of life, and you build upon those. So clearly your attention when you're little as a baby isn't as strong as your attention when you're 3 or 4, but it's a building block towards talking and better talking.
Right. And so then how can you give us an overview of what kind of typical development is like beyond that? Kind of into early childhood.
So I mentioned that, so at around 12 to 15 months, we're getting our first words. Some kids, there's a very big difference between what kids do in those early years, and things tend to come together a little bit later. So some kids, our late talking group, may not say their first words till closer to 2. There's certainly kids we'd like to meet, just to make sure the other building blocks that I spoke about, attention, play, social, comprehension, are just established, because really, if they're established, usually those kids will become our late bloomer group. So they'll develop talking, but a bit later. And we've both had one of those in our family. So your firstborn and my both children were late bloomers in their talking. They're fantastic talkers now. all of them, but they did take a little bit more time. So by 2, the expectation for most kids is that we're starting to put 2 words together. So things like mummy work, or daddy gone, or want biscuit. So something like that. It doesn't have to be amazing,
complex,
but it's not complex, but they're understanding things, 2 words together, like mum might say, or dad might say, can you put your plate on the sink? So that's 2 parts together they have to understand, and they can do that. So that's by 2 years. So understanding, simple sentences, simple directions, and starting to use 2 words together. Now, of course, there's great variation in that again. So some of our 2-year-olds are still just getting that, or just saying lots of single words. You need about 50 single words before you put 2 words together. So give your child some time. It's okay. This is a marathon. It's not, a race to the finish line. As long as we're progressing with language, it's okay.
Okay. So can I just ask a question
there?
Two.
I go so slowly. No.
That's okay. I just had a question about whether there's things parents can do to help develop that, because that's something parents often worry if their children are one of those kind of late talkers or something. What can they do to encourage the language?
So I get a lot of parents that are coming in around that 2 age with our late talkers. So for me, it's if your child is a late talker and they are around the 2 age and they don't have many words, it is useful to come and speak to a speech pathologist. Just because, like we were talking about that progression, we just want to check everything and just make sure other things aren't getting in the way of them learning to talk. So for the kids that have good attention, play, social communication, so that's that. I want to interact with you, mum and dad. I want to show you stuff. I want to play together. For those kids, probably the most important things are first to make sure you're face-to-face with your child as much as you can when you're communicating. So making sure you're at their level. The next thing is to try and follow their lead in play, because we talked about how communication needs to be really fun. If it's not fun, they're not going to do it. So if we're trying to get activities out to teach children, they're less likely to engage than if we follow their lead in play and have fun.
Right.
So probably less on the can you say cat and more on the let's play with the animals.
Yeah, or what they're pointing at or something. Oh, that's a dog. Okay.
So face-to-face, make sure that you're following their lead and having as much fun as you can. And then the other thing that I always talk to families about is trying to ask less questions in that teacher style as well. So instead of when you're playing, say, oh, what's that? Or what are you doing? That can really shut down communication for children, because they really only have one option, and that's to answer. And if they don't know the answer, then they'll shut off anyway.
Right.
So the more important thing to do is comment as much as you can about what you're doing, what your child's doing, and then it can really develop a lot of communication. They hear a lot of repeated language, and then the last thing is to give them an opportunity to respond. So with late talkers, I find parents are often so concerned that they're filling in the gaps and using lots of language and saying, if I talk more, they'll hear more and they'll talk more. But actually we need to slow right down, wait. So say something and then wait, give them a pause and let them have a chance to say something. And you'd be surprised, even if it's just a sound, the kids light up when they feel like they're being understood. So
yeah, great.
They would be the main things.
Okay, wonderful. So I did interrupt you.
No, I was.
That's okay.
I could talk for years about communication.
Yeah, I can see you're passionate about it. So I'll let you go on then from age 2.
So from 2 to 3 is a really fantastic, explosive time for language and play. And attention, everything sort of starts to come together between that 2 and 3 year age group. So by 3 years, we're speaking in short sentences. Some kids, again, are speaking in long sentences. We're moving from talking about just what's happening right now, so just what I'm playing now, to talking about sharing information. So things that have happened when I've been out and about. So kids often share events that have happened with one parent with the other parent.
Right.
A lot of it doesn't make sense and it's really confusing and you have to fill in the gaps. But they're so excited about sharing information about especially silly things that have happened to Nana and Grandad. They tend to be the hilarious things that they like to share about what's happened, or siblings. Kids between 2 and 3 are developing skills to play together.
Mm-hmm.
Kids with siblings have a lot of experience doing that, but a lot of kids are still just playing alongside. They're interacting a little bit, but not anywhere near as strong as the 3 to 4 year age group. So by 3, we've got short sentences. 3 to 4, we have another big explosion, but this time it's with language talking now in combining sentences together to form stories.
Right.
So stories for me are the most important part of life. So even if you think about you and your mates, when you get together, you share stories. That's what you do. So being able to sequence a story and being able to tell your friends your story is part of social interaction. So kids start learning that from 3. They're putting the stories together. Between 3 and 4, they start playing together. And that's why we have kindy between 3 and 4. It's no accident that we put kindy at that age group, because that age group is where kids really start wanting to play together in cooperative games, not just playing alongside and occasionally mentioning something to each other, but really playing together and forming stories together, because that's how we play. We go, let's pretend that we're going on an adventure, and we get our backpacks on and we go into the garden and we collect rocks and things like that. So they're forming a story together.
Yeah.
So all those foundation skills actually make us into the people we are now, that we tell stories and we interact with our friends and have fun. And I'll say the most important thing about the 0 to 4 group is play, 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 and play.
Okay.
Play, teaching kids academic skills in the early years is nowhere near as beneficial in the long term as teaching, you don't need to teach kids, as playing with kids and letting kids play and explore, because they're developing attention to each other, they're developing social interaction, they're developing turn-taking, compromising, negotiating, telling stories, singing and being together, and all of those things are much more important for developing oral language. And oral language is one of the most important things to get your child ready for school.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that you did a good job at explaining how important it is.
Sorry.
No.
I just don't think that learning your alphabet is as important as play in those early years. It's not got the research to say to link into literacy the way that oral language and playing with words and making up rhyming words and being silly, they're the things that form the foundation for academic development.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, and I agree with you, but I see it from a slightly different point, coming from the psychology angle. But I agree that all of those things are what helps kids be ready for school as well. Aside from the oral language development, it is those things like being able to be part of a group and tune into what the teacher is saying and, pay attention to that. That's really important for school as well.
Which just makes me think we should do one of these about getting ready for school.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Coming soon is getting ready for school.
Yeah. Actually, as you were talking, I was thinking there is a lot of communication. Communication is such a broad and important topic that there are a lot of little, smaller specific areas we could go into. And so school readiness is one of those. Yeah.
I know that's one of the things parents worry about a lot. So I do meet families that are coming in that kindy year and just saying, I just want to know if things are going okay. Are we tracking along? Being ready for school. I've got a baby born in June. Are they ready?
That was me.
That was you bringing your child to see me.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah.
So on that's a good point. When I know you've touched on this a little bit about when kids were around 2, but when should parents come and see a speech pathologist or seek help for their child's communication?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's even earlier than that. I would say around the 18-month mark, if you feel that your child is not playing with you and keen on interacting with you, bringing toys to show you so that you can play together, wanting to start playing pretend type of play, and using a couple of words. If those things aren't there, I think it's a good time to start thinking about going to see someone. And parents can chat to their GP first about those concerns, or you can see a speech pathologist. You can see other professionals as well at that point. But sometimes speech pathologists are the first people to see kids because parents are worried about they're not talking, but then underlying that there's some things. So at 18 months, really, you want your child to be coming up to you, wanting to annoy you all the time with all their exciting toys and objects that for us you think, yes, it's a block.
It's a block.
It's a block. But that's a really, really important thing. So if your child isn't doing that and you feel like they're not engaged with you, they're not really responding to their name, that's a good time to come and see someone. By 2, if they're not putting 2 words together and they have very few words, it would be worth just coming to see a speech pathologist just to get some of those tips around how can I play with my child so that I can help them develop language, and just to check their comprehension and to check a few other things. Moving through the time, through as we go up, by 3 years old, really unfamiliar people should be understanding about 50% of what you say. Kids are not clear in what they say. Some kids are. Again, there's that big difference.
Range, yeah.
Some kids are really clear and they start talking, you're like, wow, they're so clear. But a lot of kids aren't clear, and parents are still interpreting for kids. But really about 50% of unfamiliar people should understand, unfamiliar people should understand around 50% of what you're saying at 3. That should hit up to 90% when you're 4. So if you feel like your child's not being understood by others and there might be some articulation or pronunciation problems, it's a good time to come in around the 3-year mark, just so that we can check that. Of course, if your children aren't putting sentences together or stuck at the 2-word level, or feel like they're just not understanding what you're saying, again, between that 2 and 3-year mark, it's nice to see kids early so we can give some really simple strategies early on to prevent some of that stuff that can develop. So between the 2 and the 3, once you hit 3, if you're really not intelligible and you're speaking sounds are not clear, you can start thinking about coming in as well.
Yeah, okay.
Should I keep going? By 4, I would hope to have met all these children.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that I think also there's a lot of benefit in coming when you are unsure, because you can either get help or you can get reassurance that it's all okay and it's on track. But like you say, the early intervention is a lot.
Early intervention makes a really big difference.
Yeah.
Kids are like sponges, so if there's a few things that just aren't clicking together and we can change those early, it really does make a big difference.
Yeah. Okay. One last question I had was whether, because we've talked a lot today about what the milestones might be and when to seek help, if there are any resources you know about for families where they can go and find this information.
So the Speech Pathology Australia website has a range of fact sheets around early children's development, including play, speech, which is the articulation side, language, which is the putting sentences together. So I would direct most people there. The Raising Children's network.
Yeah, I think
they changed it back to Raising Children.
Okay. Yeah, Raising Children, the website.
The website always has great information. Or you can obviously look at Paeds in a Pod, listen to our information, and we are putting more and more on the blog. So if you have concerns, you can let us know via this podcast and we can certainly get some information that meets your needs up on the website.
Definitely. We'll put some links to that as well. So that's great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to talk about communication.
Yeah, I can tell.